is this critical race? What is this critical race theory? I think the best way to understand it is to give you these 4 main principles of CRT. And I'll let CRT speak for itself. I'll let the fathers and founders of CRT give you the main principles of CRT. By the way, in the academic literature, people write journals and peer-reviewed journals, and if you're an academic, you want to publish peer-reviewed journals, right? That's how you get your academic bona fides. You publish in peer-reviewed journals. And if you publish in a peer-reviewed journal and you get, say, a couple of hundred citations of your work, you pat yourself on the back. You're getting it done, right? You had hundreds of citations, hundreds of other scholars who are referring to your work. You're getting it done. The stuff that I'm citing has thousands of citations. Thousands. Some of them upwards of 5,000, 6,000 citations. So these are not obscure people out there in the corners, of academia. No, these are the rock stars. And these are the agreed upon pillars of critical race theory.
What makes me an expert is that for the last 15 years, I've been a trained scholar with an Ivy League PhD who has written and studied race. What makes me an expert is that I have lectured widely around the world on critical race.
Remember, according to this resolution, CRT is an analytical tool, right, that helps us analyze issues of race and so on and so forth, okay?
What I will tell you is that critical race theory is a theory that actually emerged out of critical legal studies. It is a theory that makes an attempt to understand the law through the lens of race.
This is from the seminal work on CRT. Principle number one, racism is normal. It's the usual way society does business, the common everyday experience of most people of color in this country. Racism is normal. It is everywhere all the time. It is unavoidable. Racism is normal.
And it's founded on some fundamental presumptions. One is the intractability of race and racism, meaning that it's an intractable problem in America, and that we have to use the lens of race to make sense of things.
You have kids and you ended up watching a Lego movie. Then probably for the next 3 days, you just kept hearing, everything is awesome. Everything is good when you're about to. So, critical race theory says, everything is racist. Everything. The most popular critical race theory book, practical critical race theory book, a book titled White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. DiAngelo says that in terms of, interactions with people, you don't have to ask whether racism occurred. You ask how racism manifested itself here. Because we assume that it occurred. Why? Everything is racist. Everything. By the way, this is what the 1619 Project is all about. Listen, if America is founded in 1776, then we're founded on the principles of the Declaration of Independence, right? Or let's say, you want to just be technical about it. And you say, okay, I get that, but really, really, really technically, we're founded in 1787. Because that's, Constitution, ratification, right? 1787. Cool, fine. Now, it's the Constitution. So either 1776, Declaration of Independence, or 1787, Declaration of Independence and Constitution. Either way, right? Either way, we've got some documents that say to us, this is what America is. 1619 Project says, no. America's established 1619. Why 1619? I'm glad you asked. Because according to the authors of this Pulitzer Prize-winning project, that is some of the most horrible historiography you will ever find anywhere. 1619 is when the first black slaves came to America. You see, if America is defined by the first time black slaves come to our soil, then America is defined by racism. The 1619 Project is about the first premise of critical race theory. We must define America by racism. There's a movie called The Wiz. You saw The Wizard of Oz. So there was the Wiz. The Wiz had a predominantly black cast, and there was Nipsey Russell and Diana Ross and Michael Jackson, and it was the Wiz. Michael Jackson played the Scarecrow, and Michael Jackson's character was introduced by a song, because everybody's got to sing a song when they write. His song was "You Can't Win," and here was the hook. His song: "You can't win, you can't get even, and you can't get out of the game." That is a summary of Robin DiAngelo's white fragility. When it comes to white people and the charge of racism, you can't win, you can't get even, and you can't get out of the game. Secondly, convergence theory, or interest convergence theory. This is the second major tenet of critical race theory. Again, according to the seminal works on critical race theory. I'll read from the seminal work on critical race theory, Delgado's book, Critical Race Theory. Racism advances the interest of both white elites, materially, and working class whites, psychically. Large segments of society have little incentive to eradicate it. This means whites are incapable of righteous actions on race and only undo racism when it benefits them, when their interests converge with the interests of people of color. And yes, he used the word righteous. White people are incapable of righteous actions on race. Everything is racist. Well, this thing wasn't racist, then that must mean that the white person benefited from it, because that's the only time that white people will do anything other than be racist. So according to critical race theory, white people are not only racist, but incurably so. Ineradicably so. It can't be anything else. An entire swath of people condemned by their melanin count. Third principle is anti-liberalism. Now, when I say anti-liberalism, it doesn't mean conservatism, right? Anti-liberalism in terms of the academic use of the word, right? Like liberal arts. Anti-liberalism. CRT questions the very foundations of the liberal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, Enlightenment rationalism, and neutral principles of constitutional law.
Equity versus equality. I have no idea why we just instantaneously shifted from equality and went to using really racist images such as this one. The one where white people are equated to adults and black people are equated to children, which just implies that there is an inherent setback within us as a people. If you're black, you just are a child compared to the white person. And I get it. This illustration is meant to show the historical setbacks that black people have faced that put them behind white people. I understand that, and I absolutely get that. The only thing that stands in the way of using this illustration effectively is that Nigerian Americans are the most successful immigrant group to the US. That sentence alone just shows that this whole notion of equity and this whole justification for using an image like that falls apart. And why are we talking about equity in a social context? That's just impossible. It's impossible. Start with the fundamental truth, which is that we are equal. We are equal. We are equal. Black people are not children compared to white people. Individual circumstances vary. That's the truth of the matter. And let's start from there before we run to bring in equity, the conversations. Pastors, I'm looking at you. Pastors, I am looking at you. Don't be talking about Jesus died for all of us and then talking about equity and talking about how we need to use equity to fix problems for certain people because their humanity is struggling a little bit more than others. God blesses us all with his mercy.
And the fourth one, which is the idea that knowledge is socially constructed. Knowledge is socially constructed. There is no objective knowledge, no objective truth. You see, in a culture, the hegemony is just the hegemony. We do not determine whether or not the hegemony is objectively true. We can't determine that because these people have constructed whatever the hegemony is. And it exists because it's been constructed by the oppressor for the purpose of oppression. And we certainly don't operate within its confines. So, Delgado writes, storytelling, narrative reading is the way black people forward knowledge versus the science and reason method of white people. Science and reasoning is white. The scientific method is white. There was a big stir last year when this flyer came out from the Smithsonian's Museum of African American History. And this was kind of an explanation of and an expose of whiteness, and there were certain things on it like this is whiteness, like scientific method, emphasis on being on time, emphasis on self-reliance, these sorts of things. The basic understanding of the nuclear family, which is why Black Lives Matter, before they took it off their website, made it clear that they were about deconstructing, destroying, undermining the Western nuclear family. By the way, just like Marx was, just like Hegel was, just like Gramsci was, and just like the Frankfurt School was. Why? Because the family is a powerful actor in the transmission of hegemony. If you want to break this, you've got to break up families so that children are not raised in these institutions that pass on tradition so effectively. So, minority status, in other words, brings with it a presumed competence to speak about race and racism. The legal storytelling movement urges black and brown writers to recount their experiences with racism and the legal system and to apply their own unique perspectives to assess law's master narratives.
It also is based on the use of counter stories. Listening to as Derek Bell, the critical race scholar, said, the voice is at the bottom of the well to make sense of the world and to make sense of the law.
Terry also refers to it as the centrality of experiential knowledge and says that CRT recognizes that the experiential knowledge of people of color is legitimate, appropriate, and critical to understanding, analyzing, and teaching about racial subordination. By the way, this last principle of CRT, the idea that the experience of marginalized people is a means and a vehicle to discovering knowledge. It's another way of knowing, right? This principle is everywhere. Not everywhere, it's everywhere. That's beyond everywhere, right? It's everywhere. Let me give you a couple of examples of this, right? We have an issue with race. There's a problem of race, and there's a problem of, people like to say, racial injustice, right? Okay, fine. There's racial injustice. Let's go change the unjust laws. Nobody's saying, hey, this particular law, nobody's saying that, right? Let's go tear down the whites only fountain. Nobody's saying, nope, they're not there. It's structural and institutional, okay? let's go. Where are the structures? Let's do that. Where are the structures in it? And within the church, nobody's saying we need to have a Bible study about race and racism and reconciliation. Nobody's saying that. What are they saying? We need to have a conversation about race. Why? Because according to critical race theory, that's the way you discern truth, the experiences of marginalized people, which is why in this conversation we're told we need to elevate the voices of the marginalized. Been hearing this? Been hearing this at school? Been hearing this at your workplace? This is CRT 101. We must elevate the voices of the marginalized because they have other ways of knowing. We don't need a Bible study on race because that would assume the validity of the hegemonic oppressor's view toward the way we know things, objective truth, scientific method. So if you say we need a Bible study on it, that's just your whiteness fighting for white equilibrium. And if you are uncomfortable with the idea that discussions and conversations are the way that we discover truth, that's just your white fragility.
If you like this video, press like. If you love it, subscribe.